Hello everybody, welcome back to Artisan X, a resource hub for the developers of X-Plane aircraft. If you are looking for information and resources regarding X-Plane aircraft development, you are in the right place. Module 3, Resource Planning. This is the third module of a 5-module series on developing aircraft for X-Plane. These modules are available on the Artisan X project pages located on the Artisan Simulation website. Select the Artisan X menu item to see the full set of online resources for new and existing developers. Now, let's dive into resource planning. For the purposes of this module, we'll divide those resources into 4 buckets. We'll define each of those buckets and then share a few thoughts on what goes in them. Finally, we will look at the relationship between time and money. The first bucket has people in it. Well, maybe just one person. You. In a previous module, we discussed solo development versus working on a project team. The right choice for you will depend on a lot of what you want to get out of the experience. Let's first look at going solo, or as I call it, the lone wolf. The lone wolf would probably have the following reasons for going it alone. He or she wants to experience all the phases of the development process. He or she has limited time to devote to the project and does not care how long it takes. The project timeline would be too long for a team. He or she is an introvert. Teamwork is just not fun for you. And lastly, you may not want to give up total control over your project. If you decide you want to do everything yourself, just remember, you're going to have to do everything yourself. On the other hand, you may be an extrovert and think a team player would be a better role for you. Team players would be looking for the following concepts. You enjoy working with other people. Maybe you only have limited time and contribute only to one phase of a project. Maybe you want to learn from other subject matter experts. Or maybe you're just happy to let someone else make all the key decisions. There is no single right answer for this question. There is only the answer that is right for you. The next bucket of resources is about time. No, really, it's about time. We all know time flies when you're having fun. My experience is time goes to warp speed when you get into the groove developing an aircraft. Here are a couple of other thoughts regarding time. What time are you willing and able to give to a project like this? Remember, you're on a journey, not a sprint race. When do you want to be done with the project? Is this a long-term hobby or just scratching an itch and want to get some experience? And it's not just about your time. What time are your significant other, family, and friends willing to put up with you spending on this hobby? So ultimately, you're going to have to decide how much of your time you're going to put into the resource bucket, and if you want anyone else to put their time into the bucket with you. Like the people bucket question, there is no single right answer, only the answer that's right for you. The next bucket of resources is full of the tools you need to get the job done. Is your hardware up to speed for this? If not, what would it take to get it there? What kind of software do you already own and what do you need to get? Is your workspace ergonomically friendly on your body for long sessions? No matter how much you plan to do, sometimes you'll just decide to push and you can spend a lot of time at your desk. Having taken stock of these resources, it's time to convert any shortcomings into the fourth and final resource, money. No matter how well prepared you might be, you're probably still going to have to throw some cash into the money bucket. It would be good to know what kind of investments you need to make before you start the process to make sure that you have the financial stamina to stay with this through the end. For the sake of this training, let's assume that the following list is what we need to complete our development environment. A 4K monitor, an external hard drive for backups. Remember the 3-2-1 backup. You've determined that you need a good flight sim yoke and throttle to really develop a plane accurately. There's some Blender plugins that we're going to talk about buying, and there's Substance Painter. And lastly, we're going to throw in some money for online training because at some point, you're going to need a little help. Now, let's take this list and turn it into a budget for the project. So now we've added some numbers to our list and made it a budget. And just like time always seems to fly, budgets always seem to grow big really fast. But it's not as bad as it seems at first glance. First, you don't have to buy everything before you start. For example, you don't need substance painter until you're mostly done with 3D modeling. And the online training budget can be held in reserve until you know you really need it. If you're doing this as a hobby, think of this as investing in your golf clubs. You don't buy a new set of clubs every time you go golfing, so the resources you buy will stick with you long past this project. Now, let's look at the budget in a different way. Here, we're going to look at the relationship between time and money. For this example, let's look at the cost of a single item, in this case a plugin for Blender, one that I will be recommending later on. Fortunately, Blender, a 3D modeling application, is free. You can make a donation if you want, but there's no charge for the application. There are a lot of good free plugins, but some of the really good ones do cost money. The Hard-Ops Box Cutter plugin retails for $38. Compared to Blender itself, this seems expensive. But let's look at it from a time value perspective. Veterans of the Blender asset development world often make the case that this plugin saves hundreds of hours and produces better models than Blender alone. From my experience, this certainly applies to developing an X-Plane. Very conservatively, let's assume Hard-Ops and Box Cutter will save 150 hours of development time through your first project. With this number and the cost of the unit, we can do some simple math. If we take the cost of the plugin and divide it by the hours saved, we see that we are paying 25 cents for each hour saved. Moreover, if we assume that we are spending about 20 hours a week on the project, we just knocked 7.5 weeks off the project timeline. Using this cost analysis, it seems almost foolish not to make the purchase. If we go back to that golf analogy, this would be similar to asking, is it worth spending money on a putter? You can play golf without it, but would it really be worth it? For a second example, let's look at something that's a little less of a no-brainer, budgeting for some training time. Let's assume you are not a veteran gaming designer and you can hack your way around Blender, but that's about your skill level. You could do what I did when I first started by saying, I know enough to get started and I can look up things as I go along. In the end, I spent hundreds of hours watching videos and figuring out how to make things work. Sometimes I'd have to go back and do a process over because I didn't do it right the first time, and that's why I was painted into a corner. As a result, option 1 for our time value equation for training costs is pay no money and spend 100 hours learning to get better. A second option, and I believe a better one, would to be invest in yourself and spend about $75 on a hard surface modeling course. This course will provide you with 6 hours of videos and walk you through the entire development process by someone who's been there and knows how to do it right. Give yourself another 6 hours to practice on your own, and then make sure you're getting the concepts down pat. Now let's try our time value analysis on this example. By buying and completing the training course, we invested $75 in 12 hours of our time, but we will save an estimated 100 hours of hacking our way through our own 3D model. The net result is that we saved about 88 hours of our time. At a cost of $75, this works out for 85 cents an hour. And just like the other one, we can look at the net time that we lost. At 20 hours per week, those 88 hours mean we just knocked 4.5 weeks off of our project timeline. Further, the 3D model will be better quality and save even more time as we go through 3D texturing and performance tuning later on. Putting these last two examples together, we get a better model 12 weeks before we would have started without these investments. The extra time will keep you on schedule with plenty of time to try out those new golf clubs as well. Let's go back to our overview and take stock of where we are. These first 3 modules were all about doing the prep work before you start doing the actual development. Hopefully, having gone through this exercise, you're seeing the value of doing this. As I said before, creating flight sim aircraft is a marathon, not a sprint. And because you prepared for it, you are now ready for the challenge. In the next module, we will start the race by working with X-Plane's Plane Maker tool. Thank you for taking the time to watch these videos. If you have any comments or suggestions, please post them on the page for this module on the Artisan X project site located at artisansimulation.com. While you are there, consider supporting this effort by making a purchase on the online store. We'll see you at the start of the marathon in the next module.